Hi there. Welcome to the No Zoo Lines podcast. My name is Ari Knazan, and I am joined by my very good friend and co-host, Chad Lyman. And we are really excited to bring this podcast to the law enforcement and Jiu Jitsu and control tactics community. We've been talking about it for a really long time. Chad approached me some time ago, and he's like, "Hey, I want to do a podcast." I'm like, "That's a great idea." And so we got together, and we're going to do it. The No Zoo Lions podcast is going to be a no holds barred podcast. We're going to talk about topics that are taboo. People kind of skirt around issues. We're really going to push the envelope here because we think it's important. Chad and I both believe that training is absolutely necessary for people in law enforcement. And Chad's been in the game for a really long time. So we're just going to kind of give you an intro on what we want to do and who we are. And before we start, the whole thing of the No Zoo Lines podcast, Chad has this really great speech, and he's going to give kind of a succinct version of it right now. I have a couple of videos of him actually doing it, seminars and stuff. But Chad, why don't you just talk about what the No Zoo Lions are, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, so I had heard a TED talk on no zoo tigers, which I don't like tigers. I prefer lions, African lions. But the talk was very, very true. And it wasn't even pointed at what we do, but it's just general true principles. And the idea is if you look at a lion in the zoo, he gets fed, he gets taken care of by the zookeeper. If he gets sick, they take care of him. If it's a rainy, stormy night, they give him shelter. If there were one lion in the zoo enclosure that was attacking and beating up the other lions, they would separate the lions. In the zoo, it's still a lion. And if you don't think it's a lion, if one of these people who really believes in freeing the lions jumps into the cage to try to help all the poor lions, they're going to eat that dude. Or you throw an animal in there, they're going to kill it and eat it. They're lions and they're in this zoo setting and they're arguably probably pretty healthy. They're not missing meals, they're being well cared for and they're growing, but they're still different. If you have a wild lion to contrast that idea of the zoo lion in the wild, that lion is going to grow up and learn how to eat and go out and hunt and kill, or they're not going to eat and they're going to subsequently die. The things that they hunt or they eat in the wild are actually trying to kill them back and sometimes are successful. So even eating or finding food is a struggle for a real lion. Shelter, he's got to find it where he can find it. If another lion wants to fight him, he certainly can momentarily run off, but there's strength in numbers. The lions in the wild don't have any of the benefits. What traditionally could be considered a benefit of a lion in the zoo. And so I often pose this question after describing the two lions. Maybe we'll have a drawn picture on a whiteboard or something of the two lions. I'll say, well, what would happen if we took the zoo lion and we put him out into the wild? And universally, the classes say, well, he's going to die. And I'll say something like, well, how long will it take? And pretty much as long as it takes for him to die. And who's probably going to kill him? Other lions are going to kill him. So you have a difference in these two lions. And then I'll pose a question to the class, what's the difference? And sometimes we'll get answers like, oh, one has instincts, one doesn't. I disagree with that. They're both lions.
Mhm.
They haven't become something else. One has desire or drive. Well, you could take the zoo lion, he could have a lot of drive and you could put him in the wild. He's still going to die. And we work through this process where we eventually identify the difference between my wild lion and my zoo lion is my wild lion has knowledge. And that knowledge comes from struggle. Through struggle, they learn things that are essential for their survival. And that knowledge, and then we talk about how all learning that we really everything we learn that has value has a price attached to it. Nothing's free. And we wrap that back towards law enforcement training. Too many times in law enforcement training or police officers themselves will shy away from physical hard training that has some struggle to it. Of course, we need safety. We're huge proponents of that. We'll talk about that on this podcast. You can train hard and be safe. You and I have been doing it for years, but your training has to have struggle for these officers to learn the things they need to learn so that when they're in an actual conflict, they've already done that before. So we equate it right back, and we equate it back to the fact that when I look at a lion in the zoo, I could think I'm looking at a lion until you put that lion among real lions. Well, same thing with a police officer. I go into the station house, I change out, I throw my uniform on, I put my badge on, I snap my gun belt. I look like a lion figuratively. I look like a police officer who's ready for the rigors of police work. But if you put me into a situation in the wild, not in the station house, not in a room where we did DTs on PowerPoint and we looked at DTs on PowerPoint, or we read a lesson plan, or we weren't allowed to touch each other in DTs, and then you put me in the wild where where even the people I'm arresting are going to touch me back, um, you really see the flaws. And so we tie it right back to what we do, both of us, through police jujitsu and also through Invictus and also amongst our own departments. We tie it right back into that. Your training has to have struggle for you to gain the knowledge that's necessary for those real calls.
So, Chad, one of the things that I kind of see happen, or what cops will talk about, is they'll say, "Well, hey, Chad, I get it. I know the whole training thing. I want the department to pay for it. I don't have time, all that stuff." We're going to talk about that on a different podcast. But the one thing that I hear a ton is, I've never been in a situation where I've needed this jujitsu or this combative training. I'm a big guy. I'm in shape. I got heart. I've always come out on top. Like, really, is the juice worth the squeeze here? I'm there's no one that I've run into that has posed a problem in 15 years on the road.
Yeah.
Very common.
Yeah, I hear the same thing, and I'll talk about it for a second, and then you can talk about kind of how you respond to that. But I tell them that's a great point. And actually, training does not guarantee a win. I can't guarantee that you're going to be successful in any struggle or fight. So why why train at all or put yourself through this? And my answer is, um, I can't guarantee a win, but I can guarantee you're better than you would be if you did not train. In other words, training guarantees you nothing but growth. Training guarantees growth. And that's any kind of training, any kind of discipline, any kind of consistent application of principles and concepts, whether that be financially, whether that be in your relationship with your significant others, whether that be physically, your health, consistent application of a workout, and then combatives, consistent application. So I tell them, it doesn't guarantee you anything. It guarantees you better odds, just like financially. If I practice good financial habits, I'm more likely to not have a financial emergency than if I'm crazy with my money. It's training's kind of the same thing. And it does guarantee you growth. And that's really what I'm looking for. Even when you look at lions, and I always tell guys this, because they'll be worried about getting hurt in training. And I've started saying this recently, Ari. I don't know if you've heard this, because I had a guy question me about that. He says, "Hey, I buy into your zoo lions philosophy, but I am afraid of getting hurt." And that's a real fear, right? That could happen. I can't guarantee you won't get hurt if you train or you don't train. You could get hurt. And it, just like lions start by kind of play fighting, we can start training in an intensity of wherever you're at as a person, and then we can build on that and still get value. Little lions don't suddenly start killing crap. They stalk their brother, wrestle their brother 100,000 times, stalk their mom and dad's tail and jump on it. The first couple of hunts, they're unsuccessful, and they grow into this role. Well, training is the same way for me to grow into that role. If you don't do this, if you had a little lion that just went, "Holy crap, I'm just scared of all the play fighting and the biting's uncomfortable. When dad puts his paw on my head, I feel like I'm going to die, even though I'm not injured. I don't want to go through this." Well, that there's not going to be any growth, and you're just going to have a larger version of that weak, unable, incapable thing. In this case, a lion. For us, the training guarantees growth for me personally, and guarantees I'd be a better version than if I didn't do it. And that's kind of what I tell folks.
So
How
where do you,
about you?
well, so yeah, I talk about the confirmation bias, which is basically police officers will often say, nothing bad has happened to me now, so nothing will happen bad to me in the future. So that's why I'm okay. which is an illogical, it's a fallacy, right? So it's really troublesome. But the other thing is you talk about the resistance training, and this is a big one. And it's one I actually want to talk about, and will probably come up a lot on the podcast, where you had said that cops are afraid of getting injured and they don't understand what resistance training is. So I'll see people who talk to me about Jiu Jitsu. They don't really know what we're doing, but it's like I see it in the UFC. I know you guys are doing stuff, and I'm afraid of blowing out my ACL because I hear that's like the most common thing that happens. And they're not educated. And I'm hoping through the No Zoo Lines podcast, we can educate officers who are thinking about training and what the true training is that we are trying to offer. So I think let's talk about resistance training a little bit more. What are the biggest fallacies that you see, right? It's like we are going to get injured. Let's talk about how we start slow and we move into an area which we're going to protect them.
Yeah. So first off, there's another thing I've begun because things I didn't think about when I was young and I first started training. I'm 56 now. I have a host of injuries from not necessarily from training jits and MMA, but just from life in general, just like everyone else who's my age. And I to give context, I have a church group I go and they're similar age men, right? And if we go around the room and talk about the maladies of the people in the room, none of them do what I do, and they all are in pain, and they all have a host of injuries.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like one of the things I like to say is you're going to kill yourself on your couch or you're going to kill yourself in the gym, but everyone's dying. We're dying. So I am actually in way better shape than any of my friends my age. It's not even comparable. Like they couldn't even do a body weight workout that's timed um or like for one whole month to honor our founding fathers. I did 60 air squats, 60 push-ups, 60 crunches um every day until I reached 1776 number wise.
Yeah.
And so I did 60 of all three. Well, it would take me about, I don't know, 4 minutes. I do my 60 and then I drop down, do my 60 and then do my 60. It might be less than 4 minutes. Take me 4 or 5 minutes to do the whole workout. It's not
Yeah.
a workout for me.
Yeah.
It's just an extra thing that I was doing in addition to everything else I normally do. And because I do everything else, I just blew it out. And now I do it routinely a couple times a week. I'll just throw it in there because it's not hard for me because I've been hardening my body over this time. So you're going to actually get less injured by working out regularly. Your body's going to harden. It's going to get better. Another example I have of this is I recently got, and it's been over a year, but for me, that's recent because I'm old and time flies. I got assessed for an additional life insurance policy. And this kind of speaks to what we're talking about because guys will get afraid. There's a bunch of I used to guys. I used to work out. I used to do that until I blew out my knee in high school, till I,
Mhm.
threw out my hip golfing. So then I decided I can't golf anymore. I can't be active. I don't lift weights, whatever it is. The I used to guy. And instead of scaling what they're doing and continuing to do it on an ongoing, consistent basis, they stop doing it. And they think that their body is telling them to stop. Your body's not telling you to stop. Your body might be telling you, hey, be more careful. Your body might be telling you to train intelligently, but your body's absolutely not telling you to stop. And that's a trap we fall into as we age. So I go and I get, I have this guy through the police department, retired copper, who's part of a big insurance firm. And I say, hey, man, I want to do additional life insurance. So I don't want Kayleen to ever have to work if ever something happened to me. And right now, we're almost to the point where she would never have to work anyway, but
Mhm.
I want her really well taken care of if something were to happen to me. So I apply for this life insurance and I'm 56 and I'm applying for extended coverage. And they do a whole host of tests on me. They do a full physical, they do a bunch of blood work, they do all this stuff. He comes back to my office with the results. And I kid you not, this happened. And there's a combination of a couple things in my mind. He says, okay, I gotta see what you're doing. Like, what kind of workouts are you doing? What are you doing with yourself? And I said, I don't know what you mean. And he goes, we have never had a guy your age grade out the way you graded out. We'll insure you into your 80s for life insurance. He goes, that's unheard of.
Mm.
He goes, you got a top flight rating. He goes, we're a national company. Just out of curiosity, I hit up HQ. I said, have we ever had a 56-year-old dude apply with us and get the top rating? And they go, no, 50 is a cutoff. Like he's going to be mid-level typically. But my numbers were off the charts. And it's not that I'm a bodybuilder. It's not that I'm ultra lean. I'm just really physically fit. And he says, what are you doing? I said, well, I don't drink or smoke, and that's a religious thing. I try to eat reasonably. I've never drank or smoked. I try to eat reasonably, but I work out through Jiu Jitsu and MMA multiple times a week, every week. And he said, every jits or MMA guy in the department always grades out high on some of the heart things and the lung things. And he goes, but literally, we've never had a guy your age grade out the way you graded out. And it's a combination of what I try to do in my personal life and what I'm going to consume. And then it's a combination with training as I get older. And so I understand the fear of being injured or the fear of the downside of working out. But we can easily adapt to that by saying, okay, I'm not as young as I used to be. I can work out more intelligently, for lack of a better word, but I should not stop working out. And the workout should be physical, it should be demanding, and it should be load bearing. And I have a formula. Do you want me to share that, Ari, that I
Sure.
use?
I think what you're probably gonna say we're gonna ask you, but I don't know if it's your rule of three or not, but maybe that's part of it. But go ahead.
It's a different formula than rule of three. It's
Okay.
MCT. This controls our intensity. MCT is mechanics, consistency, and tempo or aggression or intensity. So I want to work out on a regular basis with correct mechanics. So remember, it's mechanics, which is how we do a movement, how we do a move, sparring. Mechanically, I want to be correct. And I want to be mechanically correct consistently, no matter what tempo I'm going at. So one of the issues I have with CrossFit is I watch CrossFit people, and I'm not a CrossFit guy or a guru, but I watch someone work out and I'm like, okay, that's crazy because they're going all over the place while they're pressing this crazy amount of weight.
Mhm.
I'm not saying CrossFit's bad, but if you are mechanically on a consistent basis going at a tempo you can't support the weight, you've got a problem. Same thing with jits or MMA. If I am trying to roll or spar with a partner and my mechanics go out the window on a consistent basis due to the pace I'm going at, I'm doing it wrong. And I am subjective to injury, and so is my partner. That doesn't mean don't ever go hard. That means mechanics, consistency get in line. Well, now my tempo can be adjusted up or down depending on who my training partner is.
Mm.
You and I could shake hands after we were both loose and warm and have a very alive, real roll where we're getting after each other and do that safely. Whereas with a white belt who's not mechanically correct, I'm going to have to control tempo because he's going to hurt himself or he's going to hurt me. So part of the I'm aging or not even aging, I just don't want to get hurt in training. I'm a cop. I'm nervous about getting hurt. It's because you don't have a coach seasoned enough that understands tempo is where the injuries occur. Injuries happen when you're too tired and you continue to go, or when you're going too fast. So those two fringes, almost every injury occurs at. And you're mechanically poor, maybe because you're gassed and you can't mechanically be correct anymore. You're so gassed. You
Mm.
can be tired and still train effectively. And you're beginning to lose consistent application of whatever it is you're trying to do. So that MCT is a way that I control my own injury probability, and then the way I control the room.
That's awesome. You bring up a ton of points because now I'm not going to go into it because I want to talk about it when we get into that particular episode down the road about training and stuff like that and intensity, because you bring up a really important point, a point about MCT. That's very cool because you have a couple ones. Like I said, the rule of three, which is one that I've always loved. And it actually, I try to do it as well. So talk about the rule of three for you.
Yeah, so the rule of three, and often what I'll do is I'll get these from other places and then I'll apply it right back. If something, this is why we're principle and concept based, and I'm sure we're going to get into this in a future podcast. But when I understand true principles and I apply them to anything I'm doing, it makes it better. So a buddy of mine was applying the rule of three. He says, and he doesn't train, he's like a insurance adjuster, different, different insurance guy. But he says, if if nature has this rule of three, if I don't get air for 3 or more minutes, and then I don't get any more air, I'm going to die. If I lose 3 pints or more of blood, I'm going to die. If we go out in the desert for 3 days with no shelter or water, we're going to die. He says it seems like there's this rule of three, and he put it back to a thing that he and I share that has nothing to do with training. So I won't bring that up, but he says there's this rule of three, and then I immediately said, "Oh man, that's true in training as well." So if I have a 3 day period where I'm not training, and training for us means something combative. It could mean blue gun work from concealment. If I can't get to the gym, it could mean solo drills. But the rule of three is specifically related to combative skills. And as a police officer or someone who just wants to be able to defend myself, I shouldn't have a 3 day period, longer than a 3 day period, that I do not physically train on combative arts. That could be striking, wrestling, grappling, a mix of those. It could be blue gun work. It could be knife stuff. It could be any of the above. But the rule of three says I must train every 3 days. Every time I train, there's a 3 day clock that starts.
Hmm.
So I started this morning, I trained. This afternoon, we're actually in my office here in Vegas. It's not my work day, but I'm in a unit that's 24/7. I get called in all the time, and I have a squad coming in about an hour to train combatives, and I'm going to lead them through training.
Mhm.
So in our mat room here that we built at our association for my department, because we believe in training so much as a union, we believe in it so much, we built a mat room, and we offer training to our, we're not a union that says don't train. We believe in the rule of three, and that means I don't ever have a 3 day period. I mentioned to you before we went on air, I'm going to a force science conference on Monday in Chicago. So I'm going to train today. I'm going to train tomorrow, which is Saturday. I'll take Sunday off to be with my family.
Mhm.
And then Monday, I'm going to be in a conference all day. I'm going to be in a hotel. I could do solo drills, but I may or may not get to train. Tuesday, I may or may not get to train. So I trained Saturday. Sunday, I didn't train. Monday, I didn't train. Tuesday, well, I'm doing a seminar in Chicago at a Jiu Jitsu gym, a no-gi seminar. I already set it up, and I know I'm training
Yeah.
while I'm in Chicago at the Force Science Conference, because I don't ever have. It is a rule that I live by so much that my sweet wife will now say, "We're going here." I already looked up like 3 gyms, like, and now I actually, because I've been in the game so long, often I can do seminars like I'm doing in Chicago.
Mhm.
Say set up a seminar, and really it kind of pays for the trip, so it makes her happy. But I actually train when I'm on the road. I don't have a 3 day period that I am not training in some kind of combative art ever. There's no downtime. There's no time off. The rule of three means when you train, you now have 3 days to do it again.
Which brings up a point what we will do on future episodes is we want to actually have a kind of coach's corner where we're going to give some training tips on every podcast on how to train better, how to control a room, things like that. So it's just not you and I talking. It's actually we want to give particular skills to people who are listening, and which leads me into your company and my company. So C4C, PJJ, and Invictus. I think this is a great collaboration because we are both doing similar things. We've been friends for several years, and we have similar visions. Now, the one thing that you and I have both seen over the last couple, well, several years is there are more cops training now than ever.
ever.
And it's part of a movement that you and I are part of, and that many cops are a part of. But there's so many cops training now, which is fantastic. So that begs the question, what has changed in the last 20 years? So I just want to chat with you. I want you to give kind of a brief background of who you are, where you've come from, what you've trained in, and what you've seen since your start, and why you think it's doing this.
So I started as a police officer in 1998 in Portland, Oregon, for the city of Portland. I went to college at Portland State University, and at that time they had a program called Police Corps, which I got sponsored by the Portland Police Bureau to go to college first. And so it's almost like the GI Bill in reverse.
Mm.
They pay for your college up front, and I graduated college, and then I went to work for the Portland Police Bureau. And you then have to pass field train. You have to pass the academy, pass field training, and then you have to give a minimum of 5 years to your sponsoring agency. Now, if you do this, what the way it works is I went through college first, and they held my school loans in abeyance. And every year that I gave to the city of Portland, which was my sponsorship agency as service as a police officer, I was a full-time commissioned police officer, so I'm making salary and benefits, all that.
Mhm.
But every year I served, they forgave, um, I think it was 5 grand off my school debt,
Mhm.
if I remember. No, it might have been. It was more than that. I think it's more than that. I got school pretty much paid for by the Portland Police Bureau. I had to pay a very little amount, very, very small on the back end. And what would happen is every semester I'd go to the financial aid office, and it's basically like I was on scholarship. And they would pay for books and books, they'd pay for classes, and they gave me some extra money for housing and stuff. Didn't pay all my bills by any means, but it paid all my school pretty much. And then that money got forgiven as I did years of service with the Portland Police Bureau. So
Mhm.
that was 1998 that I started. By the end of 98, just through being in team sports throughout my life, I knew I needed to practice to be good at anything. And I realized um, the training in the academy for the Portland Police Bureau, our DTIs were wonderful officers who were doing the best they could, but they didn't have real experience in a jiu-jitsu or an MMA world. And they had gotten certified. And the department practiced a lot of Aikido, which can be effective, and then some other things that I felt like was not very effective at all. And some of the Aikido was not effective because it's probably because it was bastardized. It's not being taught, and you're not getting reps like you would.
Yeah.
So really, everything they were teaching us, what I noticed quickly is uh, I would try this in the street and stuff wasn't working. And then I came from a background as well where I grew up in a neighborhood and in a time where it wasn't uncommon to get into fist fights if you weren't going to be bullied or have your lunch money taken.
Mhm.
And, and so I knew how fights went. And once I started getting into struggles at work where guys didn't want to cooperate, I just wasn't having success with what they had taught me. So I started looking for other options. My older brother had started jujitsu under Megaton in Phoenix, Arizona. My brother had earned a blue belt unbeknownst to me.
Mhm.
And he visited me in Portland, and he just proceeded to wrap me up and make me quit multiple times. He said, "This is what you got to do." We started watching those early UFCs, and I started seeking out training. I went to a Taekwondo school, and I thought that wasn't super law enforcement. Um, it didn't have a lot of parallels to what I was doing in law enforcement.
Mhm.
Whether Taekwondo can be an effective striking system or not, it didn't matter because it didn't offer me physical control over another person, positional control. In fact, every time we clinched or went to the ground, they would break us and stand us up. So I went to like a class and I was like, it's not the answer. Then I went to like a Kempo karate school in Portland. These guys were crazy. They were kicking each other in the groin. They were throat punching each other. They were fighting for real. Like it was,
Mhm.
uh, but I couldn't do any of it. And I would even ask them, well, what happens if I stop someone and he won't get in front of my car? And they're like, well, throat punch him. And I'm like, well, I can't throat punch him. And then pretty soon I started telling them, you can't do this either. They'd be like, I gouge him. I'd be like, you can't just eye gouge a dude and take an eyeball out because he doesn't want to do what you asked him to do.
Right.
And they were like, no, no, you're defending your. I was like, no, it's not. You're going to get arrested. So I knew that wasn't a fit. They were training hard to their credit, but everything was strikey crazy. And remember, this is in 1998 when we could strike and hit people. That was more common, I should say. We can
Yeah.
still do it, but it was more common. It wasn't giving me control. I knew intuitively I'm winning, and I didn't get beat up. I didn't have a bad experience. I wasn't scared. I just wanted to be more effective. So I walked into Straight Blast Gym on MLK in Portland, Oregon. Matt Thornton, Robert Follis, those guys are in there. And I proceeded to go to a class. They weren't training in the gi at that time. They were training Jiu Jitsu and wrestling and boxing and then doing MMA, but they weren't training in the gi at all at that time. And I proceeded to just get handled, and I proceeded to get held down by guys at will. And at that time in the state of Oregon, the highest belt was blue. And those blue belts were at that gym at an affiliate of theirs in Beaverton, which is a close city. And Eugene, Oregon had another gym that was under Megaton, ironically, which is where my brother trained in Phoenix, affiliate of Megatons, and they had blue belts. But those were the highest belts in the whole state, was blue belts. And these guys were dominating me. I mean, it wasn't even competitive. And that's when I knew, at that time, Dennis Davis was a teammate of mine, and he may not mean anything to the guys listening, but now he's a head coach at Extreme Couture MMA here in Vegas. And Dennis and I met in the late 90s, early 2000s when he was a no belt, had wrestled, and now was coming into MMA and fought for years. Randy Couture came to that gym, Matt Linland, Dan Henderson, Evan Tanner, all these guys came to that gym in the early UFC and started fighting out of that gym. So I start there, and I hate it for my first 6 months. I'm just getting handled, but on calls, I start realizing I'm positionally winning all the time now. I'm sweeping dudes' feet. I'm getting to dominant positions. I'm slowing the fight down. I'm making better decisions. So from 98 to 04, my wife and I lived in Portland. I worked for the city of Portland, and we always knew we'd move back down south. And I ended up earning my blue belt in that time frame. One more thing that was interesting, we talk about more and more guys training. At the Portland Police Bureau at that time, no one was training outside of, like, I would go to class, there'd be no other cops. There was one other guy who was a judo guy named Nate Wolstein. He was a judo guy traditionally, and he started coming to jiu-jitsu class with me. And he was a great guy. Nate stayed with the city of Portland after I left. But we were the only ones who were training. But what started happening is guys started seeing my success on calls. And then guys on my squad were like, hey, we'll train with you, but we don't want to join that gym. We'll train at the station. So we took fold out mats and we laid them out in the walkway to the locker room. And so it started with just me and my partner. I had a 2-man car where I was in the car with this guy every day. Mike Chapin, phenomenal athlete, played college running back, ran the 100 meters in college, black kid, phenomenal athlete and better human being, and so gifted. And Mike and I would train together. And then other people saw how Mike and I could handle calls so successfully, and they started joining. And pretty soon our whole squad would come early to work. And this is the early 2000s. We would come early to work before briefing 2 to 3 times a week, every week. We would all train together, and I would go to the gym and learn whatever I was learning. And then I would come there and try to show it to them. And then we would drill it. And then we'd just kind of fight each other, somewhat controlled. We made holes in the wall.
Yeah.
The commander at the precinct, we made holes in the wall. He wanted to be mad at us, but we were the most effective hands-on squad in the whole city. We had less complaints. We were more effective. We were in a super violent area of the city where resistance was typical. This is true to this day, to my knowledge. He built a mat room in that station for us and matted it out, padded it out. And this was early 2000s. And they put a sign over the top in honor of me and my squad. And that mat room stands today, and guys still training it today. And they created a mat room. So nobody's training really. Then I moved to Vegas. More guys are training. By '06, I start coaching outside my department and I start my company. By 2010, 2012, I'm starting to coach a lot and teaching. But your original question on what's been this rise, I think the rise is twofold. I think we forget how new Jiu-Jitsu is in America. I'm older than Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in America. I'm older than MMA in America, like physically. Like I'm older than it's been here. So it might have been in Brazil, Vale Tudo. It might have been there are elements of MMA around the world in other cultures, but to have it be huge and worldwide, it's since I've been alive. And it's really since I've been an adult. So it's not very long.
Mm.
So you're trying to change a whole industry into a new way of thinking and a new approach on hands-on. And that just takes time. One of the huge things that's happened for us, we've hired more and more cops who have belts in jiu-jitsu, and that's a natural progression because more and more people train. Ari, when we started, it was fringe, man.
Yeah.
Like people were not staying. You talk about even now, oh, what percentage of people makes it to blue belt? Well, back then the percentage was almost nothing. People quit daily. Like you'd see a guy, you'd never see him again. And we were thumping each other. We learned how to train better. We learned MCT. The T part back then, the tempo part, the aggression part, we thought you had to train hard or it had no meaning.
Yeah.
And it was ridiculous. How hard we were training. We've learned and gotten better than that. We've learned that if I do things mechanically correct on a consistent basis, I can gain value in training even at a lower tempo or intensity. That was not what I got introduced to. That didn't start happening till the mid 2000s when we started being a little smarter on how we're training.
Mm-hmm.
So we're hiring more kids who train. And then the other thing that is starkly different is we have command staff now that has colored belts in jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
And we didn't have that 15 years ago because all the command staff, think about it's going to take 2 decades for someone to reach. It's going to take 15 years or more for someone to get to a captain level or higher. So whatever your agency has, chief, assistant chief, like we have sheriffs, we have deputy chiefs, we have an under sheriff, we have deputy chiefs, we have captains on my agency. So it goes officer, sergeant, lieutenant, captain, deputy chief, and we got multiple of those on my agency.
Mm-hmm.
Then it goes under sheriff. We have one of those. And then it goes sheriff. So we have all these levels, right? So when you and I were trying to get change within the agency, the ones who have to believe in the change are the guys who hold titles at least to lieutenant or higher to get change done. You got to be at least at a lieutenant, captain level, commander, whatever your agency calls it. If you got a deputy chief that loves jiu-jitsu, you're in like Flynn.
Yeah.
You got an assistant chief, an assistant sheriff that likes jiu-jitsu. Well, then change is going to come, right? And so I think some of it has been, we just didn't have command staff that also trained. We do now. So I think that aspect has changed. So we hired kids who train now. That's not uncommon. Every class has a kid who's trained at this point. We just visited our academy yesterday. We have 2 kids who are blue belts in the academy. They're blue belts, but they're blue belts. We have 3 kids who wrestled collegiately. That's 5 grapplers in a 40-man class. That's 5 more than there were 20 years ago. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's a change. And then people are promoting who have trained because we're now getting it within the US and within the industry long enough. And then the third thing is people like you who bring data or I'm pretty careful with saying scientific data. That's a whole nother thing if we're running a science. Some people will throw data around. I did the data. I know that, stop it. You're a police officer. But there are now peer-reviewed studies, which that's within the last 5 years that we got peer-reviewed studies.
Yeah.
We've had opinion pieces or non-peer-reviewed studies that are anecdotal that have been consistent for probably a decade now. and we're broadcasting the benefit of jujitsu. So how do you think for you, how have you approached this where you're trying to influence the change? That's all Invictus does is try to change the industry and the culture. What's been your approach?
Yeah, I think it's the same. I mean, I was for a long time, I think officers were looking with like, what's the magic thing? What can I do today that will change for tomorrow? And that's not what it is. It's that, as you have always said, and you're very fond of, the consistency over time equals results. And you're right, it takes time for culture to change. I talk about generational. So I
Yes.
figure that it's going to take a generation for law enforcement to go click, oh, jujitsu's new. It's not new. We just happen to be doing it when you guys weren't. So the old guard is retiring, as you've pointed out. The new guard are people who've trained, who understand the value of it, who are coming into it. It's that is the key. And most cops didn't have patience for it. So you look at the police officers who were teaching 20 years ago who actually were doing jujitsu and they were frustrated. And I talked to them today and they're like, man, I did this 20 years ago. I was trying to get, no one would get on board with it. And it's not a failing of what they were trying to do. It just takes time for a culture to embrace something and to see the benefit. We are not a quick solution type of industry. Things take time to change. And the anecdotal evidence, the scientific research, people who are putting in the time to actually look outside of just like, it's just moves. It's not, it is more than just moves. It's information. It's how you train. There is a massive industry around law enforcement training now that was never there before. When I went through the academy, it was hit them in the side of the leg with your baton. It was very rudimentary. And I haven't been on that long. I'm only a 10-year cop, but it's still in that 10 years, it has changed dramatically. So, three of my students are currently in the academy, which I'm super proud of. And, you've got two purple belts in there, you've got a high white belt, and they're in the academy right now. And then they took a picture and they sent it to me. And there was like 8, 10 of them, and they were just training on a mat day. There's a black belt that happens to be in the academy with them right now. And I'm like, this is fantastic. You would never see this. When I was at the academy, no one is doing jujitsu. When I got hired by my department, it was me that did training out of about 275 members. Now I think that's probably up to about 40 people training in my department over a 10-year period. That's massive. And I consider that a massive success. So,
Yeah. So I went to civilian. I don't do any more of I used to coach fighters here in Vegas. I don't do that at all anymore. In fact, I'm judging fights for the commission and I can't have that. So at Couture's, I still coach, but now I coach fight functional jujitsu, which is how do we use our jujitsu in a fight or a self-defense situation? And
yeah.
that's all I coach. I don't even coach our gi program anymore. I'm not opposed to it, but we have great gi coaches that are very IBJJFE and we've
Mhm.
got great MMA coaches. So my point is this though, I go to civilian class at Extreme Couture. I don't even go to class anymore that don't have cops in them. There's at least a couple cops. This morning I went to 6 a.m.
Yeah.
I was one of 4 cops on the mats this morning. Now one of them was John Alessio, who you know,
Kind of done. Yeah.
John's chimpanzee strong. Oh my goodness! And he ragdolled me this morning. He is so good. He's a brown belt in the gi. John is so good to me. I'm actually having the honor of promoting him belt wise in gi jiu-jitsu. And I'll award John his black belt. And the only reason we're waiting is we are waiting for the IBJJF standard, just so that no one can say he's an MMA guy who just got a black belt. But if you roll with John,
Yeah.
he's unreal black belt. He's
Yeah.
super good right now. So I rolled with John today. I rolled with 2 other cops. Like when the cops show up, I make time to roll with them. And that's the consistent now. I can go to a civilian class. I'm going to be in Chicago giving a seminar. There's going to be cops in the room. And that's an open seminar. It's going to be no gi. It's going to be fight functional stuff. It's going to be full of police officers. So that would not have even happened 15 years ago. If I went to Chicago and did a no-gi seminar, it'd just be an MMA seminar 15 years ago. But it's changing and it's changing over time. and we're seeing these changes implemented. I think one of the things that's beneficial is it works.
Yeah.
Like grappling based fight systems work. Um, now I say based because I believe that should be where you have to be. You have to be fluent in grappling if you're going to fight people, and especially with weapon systems.
Yeah.
And then you've also got to be able to be competent, I would say, in everything else. But you got to be fluent in grappling.
Yeah.
Like 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 if I can speak grappling and I can also speak striking, weapon stuff, wrestling. Wrestling's part of grappling. So I can speak grappling, striking, and weapon stuff. But the other two are for me, for Chad, these two are like second languages. This is my primary language.
Yeah.
And I can speak these and I'm competent. I can hold down a conversation, but I'm going to go to this. And here's the other beauty of that, because a lot of guys, this was a big pushback in law enforcement. Well, I don't want to be grappling. I don't want to be on the ground. And that would be the excuse.
Hmm.
And it was kind of like, well, first off, where do you take people who are fighting you? Where do you handcuff those people? So we're being disingenuous. We absolutely take them to the ground and handcuff them or against an object. So we're being disingenuous by saying we would not go to the ground. We go to the ground all the time.
Yeah.
We just want to win that engagement, which means we need to be fluent in grappling. So that was disingenuous. But then I also will often ask people, am I going to be better naturally? Let's say I'm an athletic, strong guy. I'm just a specimen, and I'm a better athlete than Ari. Will I be magically good at grappling, or might I use my physical tools to strike Ari with little training, still fairly effectively?
Mhm.
And the answer is I'm going to naturally be able to at least throw my hands at Ari,
Yeah.
but you won't naturally grapple well.
Yeah.
That won't happen. You won't naturally be winning inside position, managing distance, creating angles, um, getting head position. You won't naturally do any of that. Those are all trained behaviors. So if I have to fight another human being and they don't train, but they're tough and they have dog in them, they are more likely to be successful in non-grappling exchanges.
Yeah.
Because grappling is a trained skill set over a consistent amount of time.
Yeah.
And it's learned. Nobody's naturally, I look great in my t-shirt. I got my six pack and I come into no gi class.
Yeah.
I bought a rash guard online. It's never been worn. I look at the guy and I can tell he's never worn it. It's brand new. He's got fight shorts on and he comes on the mat and he is a specimen. That guy is going to get worked in grappling class. That dude is going to get worn out. He's going to quit repeatedly. And he's going to get played with by a 40-year-old accountant who's a brown belt who trains all the time. But that same 40-year-old accountant may not want to box with that guy.
Right.
Now, if the 40-year-old accountant boxes and speaks the language at least, he'll be fine there too, for the most part.
Yeah.
But if he's going to get finished by new guy, it's not going to be from a grappling application because new guy doesn't know any.
Right.
They're learned behavior. So grappling is a must-have for law enforcement. And once people see guys who are good at it, they just can't deny its effectiveness. It checks every box.
Yeah, and it's funny because so you bring up kind of one of the points as we wind down here about the upcoming topics that you and I are going to chat about. So I'm going to kind of give a sneak peek for the next few episodes that we're going to be releasing. So we're going to be doing one on positional versus lateral restraint, which is a massive topic right now. We are going to deep dive into the benefits of them. We're going to talk about some of the BS which is out there on how people are trying to own certain moves and things like that. We're also going to talk about why cops truly don't train.
Yep.
We're going to talk about does grappling matter in policing and in training, which it does. And also on the flip side of that, can you get too involved just in grappling for policing and how that can be problematic for us.
Great
Also going
topic.
to chat about older cop grapplers and how they can survive just continuing, into their 60s, 70s, and 80s. I think it's really important. So, Chad, before we go, do you have any words of advice, anything you want to leave to our listeners? And hopefully they'll, be tuning in the future.
No, well, yeah, number one is just a lot of gratitude in my heart. Guys will sometimes ask me, uh, younger guys who have some passion, they're excited about being a cop, they're excited about training, they're excited about coaching or instructing, but they're still green in almost all the areas. Maybe the kid's a blue belt, a very decent level blue belt. So they're on their way. They haven't coached a lot, and they want everything to change overnight for themselves and for everyone else.
Mm.
They'll say, "Hey, how can I be like you?" And I'll say, "Okay, first off, don't do that. Like I am completely, this is all I do. This is it. My family, my faith, friends, like Ari, I'll make time for. And other than that, I'm training. Don't be like me. I'm trying to change an industry and leave a mark. And I feel this window closing.
Mm.
So I tell them, first off, don't attempt to be like me at all. I mean, it's not balanced. It's nonsense. Um, but it's necessary, right? It's necessary. So my thought is I've had this same energy towards wanting to change this stuff since the early 2000s and wanting to change what we're doing. And I'm finally seeing some fruits. I have been for a while, not finally. And my thought is, I'm so grateful to the people who are going to listen to this, to the people who are going to apply it, to the people who come to our events, to the people who go to other people's events that are like or similar, to the people who train with even people that I'm not close to. The guys and the gals out there who go ahead and they consistently over time are training. They're consistent in that training. They're training a little, a lot. They're doing it. They are the change that I've been seeking for all these years, and that I've put other things aside. I used to play in softball leagues, men's basketball leagues. I was very team sport orientated. I
Mm.
coached high school sports for a couple of years. Enjoyed that. All that stuff's gone. I don't do any of that stuff. I literally am overtaken in this quest to try to spread this message. And I feel immense gratitude because here I am in 2024 on a podcast with another guy that I feel like from the beginning has been a guy I followed. Way back when you were putting out Jiu Jitsu stuff, I followed you. And then Invictus came, and you and Jason's uh, sheer drive and message of BJJ make it mandatory. We have got to train as an industry, and we've got to train effectively. Um, so for me, as we close this out, I just feel a lot of gratitude because I see things happening that I wanted to happen. I would hold classes and I would lose money. I'd have 4 or 5 guys show up for a week-long class, and my wife would be like, "What are you doing?" And she'd be like, "Hey, I support you, but this is kind of crazy." And I tell her, "Oh, it's gonna turn, it's gonna turn." And then I go with Ari to Tahoe, and we got 150 plus people in a room for several days, and it's amazing. So a lot of gratitude for me at the close of this, and for what's going to happen. A lot of gratitude for the way this is going, and for the opportunity to kind of share these thoughts. So thank you.
Awesome, Chad. Appreciate you. And to our listeners out there, remember, we now are on Instagram at No Zoo Lions. You can find us at our website where you'll find all of our episodes, which is nozoolions.com. And as Chad says, you got to choose your heart and don't be a zoo lion. We'll see you on the next episode.